Welcome to True Print for Life. I'm your host, Christina Vera.
And I'm your co-host, Maylin and
We are really excited that we've been getting so many questions and comments. And so keep those coming, because that really helps us identify, like, what do you all want to talk about? And we don't always have the answers. So we are definitely going to be pulling some additional experts to talk through some of the topics that we've also recently got. So I'm excited about some future episodes to come. But for today, we received a question from a follower, subscriber, who says, how do you rebuild after a life change? And she went on to describe, some things that happened with her. She had been in a relationship for an extended period of time, felt like she kind of invested everything she had physically, emotionally. And then one day, that was just taken from her overnight. And now she's in a place of trying to rebuild, and she's really struggling with that. And I think this conversation is going to be very different for everybody. So we in no shape or form are experts or giving any kind of medical advice, but I really, really sympathize with this particular email because, it's a challenge. It's hard. It's heartbreaking to a degree. And, I think the biggest thing is really understanding that everything is going to be okay.
Yeah, as hard as that sounds, right? I think when people say that, you're like, really, is it? It doesn't feel like that right now, but it is. Mm-hmm. I think another thing that I want to add to that is that everything happens. Well, a lot of things happen, and at the end, they end up working out for your own good. Mm-hmm. So, what are the lessons? What are the growth opportunities in every situation? So when we got that, I also really empathize because, I had to rebuild twice after 2 marriages and they didn't work out. And, the second one, I think, was harder because I thought I was like, I'm more mature. I made the right decision. I saw the right things and it still didn't work out. And at that time, rebuilding was very difficult, because what happens is, and I can only speak for myself, when a relationship fails, you see it as a personal failure. You're not looking at that relationship that failed. You're looking as like, I as a person failed, and that is probably the hardest things to get over it. Or some of the things that I have done and that I have seen other people in that situation do to rebuild is slowly kind of finding themselves again, right? So, what do you like? What do you believe in? Because all of those things are questioned. What is my value? What do I have to give to the world? Where are my finances right now? Like, where am I emotionally, physically, financially? And facing that, whatever that is. Sometimes it's not pretty. It's pretty ugly at times, especially when it was a surprise. So finding out where you are is the best place to know where you're going to go next. Because if you cannot face where you are, it's really difficult to find out where you want to be. Mm-hmm. So, I had to look at all aspects of my life and be like, where am I? In some areas, I was doing really great. I was doing really great in leadership. I was doing really great in the community. But personally, I was broken. And I think that was one of the hardest things was to face the world from this leadership place, but then inside being so hurt and not knowing even if the advice that I was giving to people really was good when I was myself feeling so down and, but I didn't stay there. And I think the best advice I can give people is don't stay there. You can stay there because I know at the time when people used to tell me it's going to be okay, I used to look at them like they were crazy. My mother was one of those people. I was like, it's not going to be okay. She's like, it is. And one day you won't even feel this way. And she was right. It took, about a year or so, I think, of the process. You have to trust the process. You have to face the pain. I would say that for people that are rebuilding, there's a pain. That, transitions are not easy. So you have to face the pain and you have to really surround yourself, if you can, with really strong people that love you. I was blessed. I had Christina, I had my mother, I had my brother. I had some really key people in my life. Some of them are listening right now that really just rally around me and will not let me stay down when I sometimes wanted to. And focusing on my work, I think focusing on my passions was very helpful. I also had to take ownership. And that's one of the hardest things when you're rebuilding is taking ownership. So there's 2 sides to everything, and you have to take your own part of what happened. And then also taking ownership of your life. So, working about your body. So I took my health into a lot of consideration. Like, where am I healthy wise? Am I eating? Am I staying active? Working out is very helpful for my mental health. So I suggest that you become active, like, walk around, go to the gym, or join a Zumba class or a workout class, a yoga class. I started doing a lot of yoga. It was very helpful. Meditating. I think meditating was really great because it kind of helped me calm my mind down a little bit. So I recommend that. If you're working, you should definitely talk to your leadership. And you don't have to go into a lot of details about what happened, but you do have to ask for what you need. So maybe you need a day off. Maybe you need to get off from work a little earlier, or leave, or come in a little later because you need to go to, to a doctor's appointment. Maybe you need to work out, and that's imperative of your day. So I think those type of things are very helpful. Asking for what you need. A lot of people want to help you. They don't know how because they don't know what to do, right? They look at you and they don't know what to, especially if you're a very strong person, they don't know how to approach you. If you are someone that's helping someone that's rebuilding, make them a meal, right? They love food. So checking in on those people. And if you are the one that's rebuilding, I want you to just know that it's going to be okay. You're not alone. You're not the only person this ever happened to, and you will not be the last, unfortunately. But you have the power to move forward. You have the power to really make of your life what you want. Once I understood that I now had an opportunity to create the life that I wanted, because maybe, an ending of something is the beginning of something beautiful. So yes, that ended, and yes, that was not what you wanted, and it was hurtful. But now you get to create. Now you get to really decide what you want. And you learn, right? So ask yourself, what did I learn from this? And then how do I apply that knowledge for the next relationship or the next job or whatever the transition is? So definitely looking at where you are and make some goals. Where do you want to go? So I made some goals. I wrote down 10 goals. These are the things that I want to accomplish over the next year. And I just check on those every week. Some days were harder than others, and having grace. One of the big things we say is always having grace with yourself. Like, really give yourself the space to feel, the space when you feel like you don't want to do nothing, don't do it, but then get up. Don't stay down, because sometimes when you stay down, depression sits in, right? So depression will come in, and if you don't take movement or take steps forward, it could suck you in. So I have a therapist. I see her once a month, whether I'm happy and excited or whether I'm facing a challenge. And it's just like I see my medical doctor once a year, every 6 months for a checkup. I see my counselor once a month for a checkup, just to check in. How am I doing? Not just personally, but professionally. So I truly recommend those things. So those are some of the things that I have done to help me rebuild, and that I'm still doing. I'm not an expert. I'm still, I think, even after you get to a good place, you're still evaluating where I am. And I learned that was like check in on myself a little more often, no matter where I am in a relationship or not. How am I feeling? Am I well? What's working? What's not working? And kind of doing a little more maintenance than maybe I neglected to do in the past.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I know, I've witnessed your journey in this process, and, it can be hard for people who, want to support, the people that they love when they're going through transitions, whether it be, a breakup or, a death or, maybe a loss of a job or income, because a life change could really be anything. I mean, I think even with everything we saw with COVID-19, like we went to bed one day and woke up and the whole world was just shut down. And I think every time you turned on the channel, it was just one bad thing after another bad thing. And so to your point is just, being able to really pause the noise and sit with yourself for a little bit. I know, thinking back, I think it was, I had my first daughter, and that relationship just was toxic. Like, we were just at a place where we just could not get it together. And at the time I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. And I meet a lot of women and even some men who are in relationships, and it's just a toxic, sometimes even unsafe situation, and they're afraid to leave because it's the thought of like, how am I going to do this? Even though they haven't left you, that, that doesn't mean you don't need to evaluate if you should stay, and I just remember thinking, at certain points, I'm like, this can't be my life. And, I mean, God willing, we've figured it out. But that took years. And, I think back now and I'm like, if I had just stayed and accepted the situation for what it was at that time, I don't know that we would have matured in the way that we've matured today. And that's 20 years, almost 21 years of growing up with a person. And we both have childhood trauma to a degree. And, we react based on some of the ways we were raised. And I just came to a place where I was like, man, I literally had this baby. I didn't have a job. And, I was living in his house. And I said to myself, if I stay here, I just don't know what I'm going to do. And so, I did get a job. It wasn't the best job, but it was the best that I could do at that time. So as Maylin mentioned, it was just kind of like, we have to be kinder to ourselves. I mean, if whatever you have at the time, even if it's not much, it's yours. Even if the apartment you have is like, okay, this is not what I see on Instagram, that doesn't matter. It's your apartment. It's your car. It's your, all these things that sometimes subliminally other people make you feel like it's not enough.
Right. And not losing your mind. I remember Jake said a sermon about this is not the time to lose your head.
Yeah.
And it came at a time when I almost thought I was going to lose my head, right? Because it was so much. I think it was so much to process. I can even imagine, right, at your age, having to face all of that.
Yeah.
And even if whatever age you are, when it's something that's traumatic that happens to you, like a big change, it's traumatic. And your brain sometimes is not ready to handle it because it wasn't expecting it. And I think that, I never want to think about the worst now, but I think you become more strong. And when I heard TD say, this is not a time to lose your mind, it really helped me understand that, you can get a heart replaced. You can get a lot of things in your body replaced. You cannot get a new brain. Like you cannot get a new mind. If your mind left you because, it got to the point where it got lost like that, it's going to be very difficult to get it back, and I come from a family of mental health. So I have mental health illnesses in my family, and I seen families get checked into places and, never sometimes be the same. And I had to, it was almost like a wake up call when I heard that sermon, and I had to really take some urgent care of myself and be like, okay, so yes, this is difficult and this is tough, but hold on.
Yeah.
This is not the time to lose your head, right? Or lose your mind.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to say that to people now. So did I not like what happened? No. But did it make me stronger? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like I can even explain how stronger that has made me, but also how much grace it has given me for other people.
Right.
And then how much I've been able to help other people through some of their hardest moments because of what I've been through. So now I can say it was a blessing. If you're facing that right now, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
And almost like what you say to yourself when these things are happening. So I used to say to myself, some affirmations or things was like, I don't want this to be it, and there's nothing good that comes out of it. I want my pain to become a blessing for myself and others. And literally I said that often, even with tears in my eyes. And that has really what it has become. That became a blessing for me and others. So as you're facing whatever you're facing, and I know it's probably difficult, there's so many resources. I mean, I was blessed that I had a really good tribe and group of people, and I had the means to do this, to help me get through it. But some of you may not have it. And some of the listener that sent this said, she has no finances. He controlled everything.
Yeah.
So now what does she do? Our moms were in the same situation. When we met, our moms were in the same situation, and that was like, I saw my mom almost lose her head, very, very, very close, if not lost it, and probably got it back, right? And that's kind of like what really ignited us to create everything we have created. So we, as we're talking today, we have definitely shared some resources with this listener already. So while you're listening, now it's kind of like our response for anyone that's going through this, but there's resources. If it's a domestic situation, Choices is a great organization to support. 211.org. If you go there, there's so many resources, no matter where you are in the country, for, food, for medical health, counseling, housing, financial bills, anything. You can go there. And if you need resources, Femergy.org also has a whole tab for resources that we put it there specifically for cases like this, for anybody facing anything. So I want you to also tell yourself, if you're here, that yes, it sucked that it happened, but then what is next, right? And that everything that happens for our own good. And I keep telling that to myself. I think this is Jeremiah 29:11. It's I know the plans that he has for me. I have that quote in my microwave. Yeah. And, I love to eat, so I warm up a lot of stuff, guys. So I see that quote all the time. And then also Romans 8:28, right? So I have those, and those were my anchor. Those two scriptures really helped me. And I think you have to find that affirmation. Like Christina said, right? She has to remind herself why she owned the table, why she's supposed to be at certain places sometimes. It's the same thing here. You have to remind yourself why you're here. You have to remind yourself why you matter, and that there's a mission, what we all came to accomplish here. And I'm not ready to leave the earth until my mission is completed. So and then until God says so. And I love living. So I had to come up with some affirmations. I am beautiful. I am smart. I deserve to be here, and
you deserve to be happy.
Yes, you deserve to be happy. Yeah. You deserve to be loved.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a hard one.
Because sometimes we cry about, relationships ending, but then I'm like, sis, look back. What are you, you know what I mean? Because in our minds, we've become so accustomed to just accepting, certain things. And then we're thinking what am I really upset about? And I think you said this earlier, you internalize it like you failed. But then, and I'm not saying that, this happens a lot, but it's just I look back on certain relationships where I was really sad when it was over. But then I also was when I started thinking through, I think I was arguing with you half the time. You were unfaithful multiple times. There were things about that relationship that were comfortable. And so I had to ask myself, am I upset that this ended because now I'm no longer comfortable? So I say all that to say that sometimes we, situations that happen like this don't always abruptly just happen overnight. There are signs, there are red flags. You see those memes on Instagram and they're like, red flag number 3.
Oh my God.
How many of those red flags did we just kind of overlook? Oh, he didn't mean that. Or no, she would never do that. And then we constantly make justifications and excuses, and we're like, oh, okay, no, I get it. And no, you really don't get it. And I think that we have to be realistic with the relationships that we're in, and evaluating them in a way that is it something that you're really in love with? It's really fruitful. Is it really your be all? Which no relationship, I'm learning, and I feel speakers and things have come in my path over the years, but I really appreciate, I don't know who said it, but somebody said a partner shouldn't necessarily complete you. It's more of, it should be a partnership to where, you add value, but the idea that somebody else is responsible solely to make me happy, to tell me I'm beautiful, to buy me flowers. I mean, this idea that somebody else is responsible for that. When, as you said earlier, if we took the time to sit with ourselves enough, and I say all this, not that I have mastered it, but it's something that I have started to work through over the years. Because I was quick, oh, you're not gonna buy me flowers? It's over.
You don't make me happy.
You don't make me happy? It's over. And I was just like, Christina, you want flowers that bad, go buy the damn flowers. Not saying that takes him off the hook from buying the flowers. So if you listening to this, husband of mine, I still expect a flower.
Buy the flowers, sir.
But it's the idea of how many of us just wait around for other people to do things that are going to make us happy. Like, we have to be willing to fulfill ourselves first. So I started buying myself flowers.
Thank you for buying me flowers.
I bought you flowers because in my mind, it's just one of those things that sometimes we put a lot of pressure
on other people.
You know, and especially if we have childhood trauma, if we got daddy issues, if we got mom issues, we are looking for certain things out of our partners that's really not their job. He's not my father. You know, and so that void of wanting this, you know, this praise and wanting to, you know, validation and all that, like almost having to think through the lenses of like, this is my partner. So you hear the word partnership. It's not this like soul, it shouldn't be a soul domineering, like be all. It's a partnership.
But we're so hard on our romantic partners.
Yeah.
Because you and I have been partners for over 13 years. And we have a great relationship.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we work
I know
amazing.
when you're hungry. You know when I'm hungry. I know what you eat. You know what I
want coffee.
We're both like, if something happens, we look at each other like, I know. We don't even have to say it.
Right. But we have a lot of grace with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that is some of the things that's missing with some romantic partnerships.
Yeah.
Is that we don't have the same level of grace for our romantic partner because our expectations of them are much higher because of the trauma, the daddy issues and mommy issues.
Right. And I think it's going back to what you said earlier, like we have to be willing to do the work. Yes. We have to be willing to say, okay, this is truly who I am. And, you know, if that means you need to be in therapy, which I feel like everybody should have a therapist. Like, it's not even, at this point, it should just be like when you see the doctor, when you go to the dentist, it should just be part of your wellness, your caretaking for yourself. But when you have the opportunity to really just evaluate and pour into yourself, it opens your mind in ways that you were clouded before. Because, you know, to what we were saying earlier, like the expectations that sometimes I would put on my partners, you know, it sometimes to a degree wasn't fair, you know, but sometimes to a degree, it was the wrong partner. And as much as I wanted that relationship to thrive and how much I loved everything about the, because we also have to think about the connection. Because sometimes these ingredients in some of these relationships are not ingredients that are really, they're not really ingredients for like a fruitful, long-term, longevity type of relation. I mean, it's all fun and games, sweetie. Until you wake up one day and you're like, no, this is not okay. And it can't just be a physical thing. It can't just be a monetary thing. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's about a partnership, and you have to be willing to pour into your partner the same way that you are expecting your partner to pour into you. And I'm not saying we always get it right.
We don't.
But if you are finding yourself really broken over a relationship that has ended, or maybe something happened, and you think through and you're like, wow, was this really a fruitful two-way relationship? Right. Because some people have been in a what I think it was Jada Pinkett. She said an entanglement or something crazy. I don't know.
It was entanglement.
An entanglement. Because some people have been, whether it's married or in a, you know, relationship for an extended period of time, but you're still lonely. So to be in a quote unquote relationship and be lonely every single night, like, what's the point? Is it just so because your family can get off your back, or is it because you have kids and you're like, but I have to stay here. I have these kids. I can't, you know, and I'm not saying, you know, I understand with children, it's a much more complicated situation because you are responsible for the lives of these young people. But in no shape or form are we designed to just take whatever, to accept whatever. Because ultimately, you know, going back to what you said, like we grew up around that. We grew up around mothers who accepted things that we knew were not right. You know, and you know, no shade, but, you know, my father, when he left, he took everything with him, including, I mean, like I remember the day, I can laugh now. I remember the day my dad left. We were at the house and I heard them arguing. And we lived in the we lived in this horrible spot. And he had ripped up the whole house because he was remodeling. Mind you, he ain't a contractor. He didn't.
But he thought he was.
He thought he was a contractor. He bought this house my mother didn't even want. Didn't give her any say in the property either. So it was like all these red flags. Like my dad had already controlled all the finances. He didn't want her involved. He bought this house, tore it all up, was going to remodel it. And so the house was all in shambles. And I remember the day, you know, they were arguing in the room and I heard them arguing. I was in the 5th grade. And, you know, she was just like, don't, you know, I heard her telling him, don't leave, don't leave. And he's like, you know, I'm leaving. And I'm just like, well, let him go. I'm thinking he's just like leaving, not like permanently leaving. And so I'm sitting in the living room watching Unsolved Mysteries. That's how long ago this was. I remember watching Unsolved Mysteries. And so he comes out and he has a black duffel bag, which I think he only probably took like a couple pairs of underwear and a shirt because it was literally like a bag, a little bag. And he opens the door. Me and my siblings are sitting in the living room. I look up at him. He looks at me. My mother's crying. And he didn't even say anything. Not even like, guys, I'll see you later. He walked right out that door. And I just remember seeing him and I saw her crying. So I still didn't put 2 and 2 together what was happening. And so, you know, she didn't say anything. Like she never even came and told us what had happened. And so I think it's also like, you know, there's a degree of what your kids need to know and what they don't need to know. Like as parents, I have my opinion on that because, you know, I know what my kids can handle and what they can't handle. But I also feel like this sense of like, I don't need to put my problems on my children. So I respected the fact that my mother didn't maybe feel like we needed to know the play-by-play. But
and maybe she was hoping he was gonna come back, and
I think he played with her for a while, like, oh, I'm gonna come back, and then he would come, and then he would leave again, and then he permanently left. And you know, and I remember my mom just being so broken. She didn't even know where the mortgage was on the house, if he was still even paying it. And I think probably about 5 or 6 months after he left, he evicted her. He actually filed paperwork. This is how you want to talk about some really outrageous people. My dad evicted his own wife and children out of the house we were living in. So because he had gotten a new woman and she was pregnant, and evicted his own family out of the house. And my mom, mind you, my mother had been with my dad for years. All 4 of her children. Never, like, he didn't want her to work. He didn't want her involved in anything. And then just one day after he got his, you know, stuff in order, it just no longer worked for him. And, you know, I had to watch my mom, you know, psychologically suffer because she did a lot of whatever you describe, internalizing, like, what did I do wrong to fail in this relationship?
And now I have these kids.
And now I got 4 children. My mother had 4 kids.
What do I do with this?
4 kids, GED, no work experience, nothing. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, so you watch, but then you see, like you said earlier, mm-hmm. God willing, she figured it out.
My God.
She figured it out. She got a couple jobs. We moved. The whole thing happened. And so you know, we have to think about, you know, just as you said, the opportunity, you know, because that wasn't even a fruitful relationship. My dad was, he was one person at one point, and then he changed into a different person. And so eventually I think my mom started to realize, like, what am I really hurt over here? Because this is all I ever knew. He handled everything. He paid everything. And she was fearful now that she didn't have him. But I don't know if that it was necessarily a love lost, because my dad stopped being lovable a while prior. But in her mind, she grouped everything together. And so I think as we are getting ready to kind of transition in this episode, I think it's important for you to really not only sit with yourself and do the work that Maylin mentioned early on as to like your who, what, when, but really evaluate this relationship that you're hurt over. And asking yourself, was this a healthy relationship? Was this a relationship that was fruitful? Was this a relationship, if you have children, that you would want your children to see every single day.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, I don't think that sometimes we think we're hurt because we lost this love of our lives or this person. But what I have heard over and over from people, you know, and I've seen a lot of Instagram posts about this, but it's the blueprint. So as women, and I don't know if as men too, we get into these relationships with this idea, right? Nobody gets into a relationship thinking it's going to fail. But you build this blueprint of what you believe the future, the now and the future is going to be. And when that is, you know, taken away from you, now you didn't have a different blueprint. You didn't have a different plan, right? So I call the blueprint the plan. And that is probably what is the most hurtful thing, you know, is because sometimes you sit down and you're like, well, okay, I lost the person or they didn't love me or whatever. But this whole idea that I have built of what we said we were going to be is no longer it. And sometimes even if you see the red flags and you see the things, you're still holding on to the blueprint so tight that you fail to see everything else that's happening in front of you because all you can see is the blueprint. So I think as you're evaluating, was this relationship good or was it healthy, right? I think sometimes we have to ask, was this relationship healthy for both parties? Was it healthy for me? What I realized was no. I think after, you know, therapy and after, you know, myself, it was like, no, it wasn't for X, Y, and Z. It wasn't. And then I had to ask myself because I found myself crying many times afterwards out of nowhere. And I'm like, but did you want this back? Because if you're crying and you're upset, you have to ask yourself did you want this back? And that was a hard question. I was like, well, do I want this back? No. And I think once I asked myself the hard question is, did you want to go back to how things were? Now knowing what you know. And the answer was no. And then that helped me move forward. Because then I now face, no, I don't want this back. Yes, I'm sad I lost the relationship, but the blueprint. But I don't want to go back to that. I want different. I want better. And I think that will help you. I think you really have to ask yourself if you're crying or whatever the situation may be, you know, do you want that back? Do you want to be back in that situation?
Yeah, and you can't force anybody to love you.
You can't. It takes two.
It takes two. So even if you're like, yes, I want it back and I want it back now, it's also the...
Do they want you back now?
Yeah, and you know, you don't want to settle for somebody who's not going to love you back.
No.
And so many of us settle because we don't want to be alone.
Right. Or we want to be loved.
Yeah, you want to be loved. And that's deeper. That's why I say that therapist and that self-time is essential. Because if you're willing to sign up to be in a relationship where you're not even being loved, you know, you might even be a side partner or something. It's like, ask yourself, what is it that you're really doing? And what is it that you're really lacking that you find that you think that that's all you deserve? Right.
But there's no love of self. And I think, you know, as much as I thought I love myself, which I do, and I think it's a journey. I think you have more moments when you love yourself more than others. But asking people to love you when you don't love yourself is really difficult.
Yeah.
Because you don't even know how you want it or how you should be loved. But you're asking other people to love you. Right. And when you ask yourself, do I even love myself? And the answer is no. That's where you should start.
Yeah.
I think before you bring other people into the mix,
right,
you should really figure out, do you love yourself? And if the answer is no, it's okay. But you have to love yourself first. Because then when people come, they will add to your life. Like Christina said, adding value. They will add value to your life. They will add love. But you already have love. And you cannot give love. You cannot drill. And I said that to myself. I can truly love no one if I don't love myself.
Right.
Because it's not authentic love. So from now on, as you're thinking your next steps, find you, love you, face you, right? And then you will be able to start building the pieces piece by piece, regardless if you wanted this breakup or not. Because even sometimes if you don't want it or you wanted it, it still hurts. Regardless of the situation, you have to start putting time on yourself to rebuild yourself step by step. No matter where you are, you're fine and you'll get through this.
Yes. So as we always say here at True Print for Life, you know, you're not alone. You are valued, you're enough, and you will get through this one day at a time, one conversation at a time, one therapy appointment at a time. I mean, this, even though it's hard and it's heavy right now, you will get to a place where you will be able to move on.
And find joy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, find joy. So like we always say,
it's bigger than you.
Thank you so much for listening today. We're excited and we hope that you follow us on
Instagram, True Print for Life, YouTube channel, also True Print for Life. And make sure that you share, like, watch our videos. Make sure that you follow us on all streaming platforms.